Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm really happy to have you here with me today where we are going to do some canning. As you can see behind me here, we have a whole bunch of jars washed and ready to fill. So what we're going to be canning today is some chicken, and we're also going to be making a huge batch of chicken bone broth. We processed our meat birds day before yesterday, so they have been sitting and chilling. The reason that I wouldn't want to can my chicken right away or freeze it right away is because after an animal has been killed, it goes into rigor mortis, and that's when the muscles all tense up, and it can take up to 24 hours for those muscles to relax again. So you want to wait until that point before you start getting them ready to either go in the freezer or go in jars like we're doing today. I really love to have canned chicken meat on hand. We use it for all kinds of recipes, but one of our favorite recipes to use it for is for something that we call chicken melts, and that's where we make almost like a chicken salad, and then we put it on fresh bread and broil it with some cheese in the oven, and it is absolutely delicious and something that we love to eat for lunch over the winter time. I talk about this a lot in my canning videos, but one of the best ways to have a bulk canning day go well is to plan really well beforehand and make sure that you have everything set up and your area that you're going to be canning in nice and clean and well organized, because once you get into the flow of a large batch canning day, it can get a little bit chaotic. So the more organization that you start with, the smoother the day will go. I do have a really thorough canning guide available, and you can get it by signing up to my newsletter down in the pinned comment below and in the top of the show notes that are below this video. And in that canning guide, I do have a smooth canning day mini guide in there that gives you really good kind of just step-by-step instructions on how to set yourself up for success when you're doing a big canning day like I'm about to do right now. So I'm going to show you everything that I have set up, and then we are going to get right into it. I'm going to show you how I part out my chicken and then how I can it, and then we'll get right into making our broth. I like to put garbage bags out on my counter as well as on my table here, because we are processing all of this chicken right in the kitchen. This helps to just protect all of our surfaces from all those juices and the germs. On our main table here, we have a couple of cutting boards. We have knives, and these knives have recently been sharpened. They're ready to go. 2 bowls, one for the breast meat that we're going to use and one for the legs, thighs, and wings. We have this giant pot over here that we're going to be using to put all the backs and necks into, and this is what we're going to put on our element outside to make our broth in. This is a huge batch that we make, but I just find it easy to do it like this rather than to try to do it in smaller batches. I have my vacuum sealer over here with my extra large vacuum seal bags for vacuum sealing our legs, thighs, and wings. Then we have this big cutting board over here and my knives that I like to use for parting out my chickens, and then 2 chickens sitting here waiting to be parted out. Out here I have a table to put my jars on, 2 pressure canners on the stove out here, and then my element down there for my big pot where we're going to make our broth. Over here I have my rings, I have my lids. I need to open those up and get those washed. A whole bunch of jars ready to go. A couple of coolers full of chickens waiting to get processed. And I am going to try using my digital pressure canner today. I've run it through its test paces. I have water bath canned in it, but this will be the first time that I pressure can in it, so we'll see how that goes. And I have some lemonade here because it is very hot, and this will hopefully help keep me cool as I go about my work. That is perfect. Okay, let's get into parting out these chickens. Okay, so we have our chicken here, and what we're going to do is run a slit right down the center of it, so right along the breastbone, and then we are going to cut along the breastbone like so, right down along the edge of it, so we can get as much of that meat as possible, like so. So we have one breast there. We're going to do the same thing along the other side. Next one. So now we're going to take our legs and our thighs right here, and we're going to push down. Now if you pull back this way, you'll actually be able to pull this socket right out, and then it is really easy to cut it off like so. So we're going to do the same thing on the other side. We're going to pop it out. You can see it right there. And cut it off. So for the wings, same. Off one side. And off the other. Now we have 2 wings. So now we have our back here, our wings, our thighs and our legs, and our breasts over here. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to pop this right into our big giant pot. And we're going to fill that pot right up with backs, and we will make our broth with that. So if you want, you can separate out your legs from your thighs. Just gonna put a cut in right there, and then same thing, just break it apart like so, and cut it in half. And then you have your leg and your thigh. So with your wings, some people opt to just cut this part off because there's very little meat or anything on that. So I may choose to do that. I haven't decided yet. I'm gonna put those aside there. So then what we're gonna do with this, and it's always a good idea to keep some paper towel nearby just to keep your hands cleaned off and not slippery. So we're gonna take the skin off of these. Beautiful, gigantic chicken breasts. And then we're going to slice these into the size that we want them, and I'll show you that in a sec. So when you're cutting meat, just kind of keep your hands in like that because it just holds it straight and makes it less likely that you're going to end up being cut. So we're looking for just, I don't know, 1-inch cubes. Look at the size of these chicken breasts. Just perfect. So if I ever see any little blood spots or anything like that on my chicken, it's not gonna hurt you or anything, but I do usually take those off. So now we're gonna get a nice clean canning jar, and we're going to fill it up with this chicken. And I am just doing chicken and salt in my jars. I'm not going to be adding any added liquid to these, which is a perfectly fine way to pressure can chicken. Quite a lot of liquid comes out of these breasts themselves. Add about a teaspoon of kosher salt to that. Ring. I did decide to take the bony part off of my wings. So I leave the skin on my chicken when I'm going to freeze it because it gives it a little bit of added protection against freezer burn. And then I can just pull it off after if I want. So legs, thighs, and wings, and the date, and into the freezer. So I just want to show you an alternative way for making bone broth or soup stock to boiling it the way that I'm going to be doing it outside. I'm going to be using my Instant Pot, and I'm going to throw a back right in here. So we have our back in here. We're going to put some water in here. So we're going to run out to the garden and grab our veg to put in here. Oh my gosh, it is so hot. It is 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade and 38 degrees Celsius in the shade, friends. Whew. I've said before that I do personally don't mind the feeling of heat at all, and especially because where we live it's very dry heat, so we don't have any humidity to speak of at all. We can always tell when there's a storm moving in just because you can feel a little bit of humidity in the air, but the rest of the time it's completely dry, which I do think makes heat so much more tolerable. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what I think that I want to grab for our stock is we're gonna grab some walking onion tops here. These guys, 2 of those. Oh my goodness. Guys, look at that flower. That is so pretty. I think this one was called a pincushion flower. I'll have to look it up because this was a new one that I started from seed months and months ago, but it's so beautiful. Look at those. Aren't those pretty? I hope this vines up. It hasn't actually vined up since I put it in here. I think I planted it here about 3 weeks ago, and it hasn't done much, but it suddenly started flowering and starting to vine up a little bit. Wow, look at the chamomile. It is definitely ready for a harvest. We're going to do a big garden harvest together, probably day after tomorrow, I think. We're gonna harvest a ton of stuff. But for right now, let's grab some garlic. I think we'll grab some of our smaller garlic, not the big ones on this side. So this was that garlic that we pulled out that was from last year, bulbs that were left in the ground last year. So I knew that they were gonna be pretty small. You can see these little tiny bulbs, but that's okay. This is actually perfect for throwing in some stock. So I think we'll do 3 of those little tiny heads. I cannot get over the heat out here. Oh my gosh. Gonna grab some celery here. Cute little baby celeries. It's probably good for our small pot. The Shasta daisies that we planted here last year made it through the winter and came back looking pretty. I really need to get in here and get my pathways mowed down, but I am gonna wait for that temperature to drop before I do that because it's definitely too hot for mowing today. There, that should flavor our broth nicely. Okay, let's get our veggies all washed up. Couple carrots, and we'll cover that up with water up to the max fill line. And we're gonna set this for 60 minutes. So you want to pressure can, or pressure cook rather, your broth for a minimum of 30 minutes, but you can go up to even a couple of hours. And then I let it come down on its own, meaning I don't vent it, and let it just come down to 0 on its own. And then I'll take it out and I'll can it up. So we have made a bit of a change of plans here, and it has to do with how darn hot it is. I have just decided that I'm not comfortable with continuing on to can, especially chicken. Of all of the meats to can, chicken is one of those that you do really want to keep it cool because the bacteria can start forming on it growing on it rather, pretty quickly. And it is just so hot. Even though it's quite a lot cooler in our house than it is outside, it's still pretty warm in here for doing this. So what we've decided to do is just pause this project for now. We're actually going to go spend the rest of the day at the lake. I got a really late start. It's already 3:30 right now. I got a really late start to this project today anyway, just because I had a busy morning. So we're going to go to the lake, and then I'm going to get up early tomorrow morning when it's cool, and tomorrow is supposed to be significantly cooler than it is today, and get all of this canning done in the morning. That feels like a much better choice than trying to push through this heat. I did do this, I did can my peaches in the heat the other day, but there's not the same type of risk for bacteria growth as there is with chicken. So it's just not a risk that I'm wanting to take. And because I just put that one back that I cut off of that chicken already into the Instant Pot, it's going to be safe and good to go in there. And everything that we have set up here, we actually have a really easy dinner already done for tonight that's not going to require the use of the kitchen. So this can just stay as it is, and I'll be back with you bright and early in the morning to get the rest of these chickens processed. All right, friends, it is now the next morning, and that was a very good decision to put a pause on the canning and wait until this morning because it is much cooler in the house now. It is 6:30 in the morning. I've already had my tea empty and I am ready to get into this project. I do think I'll be able to get all of these chickens actually cut up within about an hour or so. I only have, I think there was 15, maybe 20 that I wanted to can today. So we're gonna get right to that, get all of those cut up. And then I do have the 4 canners that I can run. I have the 2 outside, the electric Presto one, and then I do have one that I can put on the stove inside if I decide I want to, which I probably won't because it is still supposed to be fairly warm. But we are supposed to start cooling off as of this evening, which is fantastic because, my friends, it is so darn dry out there. We have had so many fires break out in our region. The closest one to the ranch is around 13 kilometers as the crow flies. But there's a lot of obstructions, rivers and waterways and things like that in between us and the fire. So we are safe. So thank you so much for those of you that have reached out to check to see if we are safe. We are okay. But the rain cannot come soon enough at this point. That is for sure. So I just kept them in ice water overnight and they are nice and cold, and it is nice and cool, like I said, in the house right now. So I feel safe to get these cut up and processed. So like I said, I will be doing a couple of whole roaster chickens, but most of them will have parted out just because I find it so much easier to use chicken when it is in the kinds of pieces that I generally like to cook with. We like to have roast chicken a few times throughout the winter. I have a really good recipe for a lemon rosemary chicken, but I definitely prefer to have them in pieces. Look at the size of these chicken breasts. Fantastic. There, nice and quick. Some people like to part out their chickens right after they butcher them, but I personally find that I need a break after the actual butchering process before I get into cutting, and I much prefer to cut chilled meat than warm meat. Just a personal preference. So we chill our chickens whole and then part them out like you can see I'm doing now when they're nice and cool. When it comes to butchering and meat processing here on our farm, I have talked about this. Mosquitoes buzzing around my head. I have talked about this over the years on Instagram. I don't know if I have talked about it here, but we did have a conversation in my membership on Friday about butchering and my feelings about it. And I shared a story about my dad. My dad was a meat cutter, and in my teenage years he owned his own meat shop, and I worked there when I was, I think, between 16 and 17. And I remember thinking it was really cool and really enjoying, like, I didn't do the meat cutting, I did meat wrapping and cleaning, but I would be in the butcher shop with my dad, and it was an abattoir as well, so he did the kill. And I really enjoyed watching him because he was not like me. He was an artist when it came to meat cutting. And I remember having a conversation with him about whether he enjoyed doing it or not. And he said at one point, and I think this was towards the end when he decided to close his shop, was that he felt like his killing days were over, was how he put it. And he explained that it just wore on him over time and he just didn't want to kill anything anymore. And I remember being really surprised by that because I grew up with my dad hunting and meat cutting and all of that. And I didn't really understand it at the time because I was still idealistic and excited to have my own homestead one day and raise my own meat one day. And when I first started processing my own meat, I found it quite empowering actually to be able to have the skills to be able to do it. I didn't feel overly emotional about it. I know some people find it really difficult emotionally, and I never really did. It wasn't that I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the artistry of actual meat cutting, but I didn't enjoy the killing aspect of it. But it didn't bother me on an emotional level until a couple years ago. think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, now at this point, where we butchered 150 chickens. And I think that was the largest number that we had ever done at once. And afterwards, I felt, I tried to articulate this in the call on Friday too, but I couldn't quite put the words to it. But it was like, there was like a heaviness that I felt, and I just didn't want to do it again. Like, I think I even said on Instagram after that day that, oh, where's my joint there? That I thought maybe we would even order our meat birds the next year, that I just really didn't want to do anymore. And I spent quite a bit of time thinking about it after that, what it was that was kind of burdening me about it. And I think it was honestly just taking that many lives. And I get it, they're chickens. We raise them specifically to feed our family. We raise them humanely, butcher them humanely and quickly so that they don't suffer. We do the same thing with all of our livestock, trying to raise them in the best way we possibly can and all of that. So I wasn't having an immoral issue from that perspective, but it was just the actual act of taking another life that kind of was burdening me. So the following year, I was feeling better about it because it had been some time. And we butchered again, another 100 chickens or whatever it was. And that went fine, but I still had the same kind of weight in my heart about it. And I remembered back to my dad telling me, and I really wished at that point that my dad was still alive. My dad passed away about 12 years ago now. And so that I could talk to him a little bit about it. Dan and I actually had a conversation after, so this was last year, I think, about choosing not to raise meat anymore. And we just kind of looked at our food production here and how much food we would have to raise kind of in our gardens. So I'm actually talking about not eating meat, not just not raising our own meat, but we were just like, okay, well, if we don't feel comfortable raising our own meat and killing our own meat, then we should probably not be eating meat. I know this is kind of a weird thing to be talking about on a channel while I'm in the middle of cutting up chicken. But anyway, it was a conversation we'd seriously had where we were like, okay, well, if we personally don't feel comfortable butchering ourselves, then we probably shouldn't be eating meat. So we kind of took a really honest look at what it would look like for us to raise our own food here, because it's kind of the goal of having our homestead, and not be raising our own meat, as far as the amount of protein we could raise, the amount of food, just the amount of gardens we'd need, and all that kind of stuff. And we made the decision in the end that due to living in the north, we don't live in an area where we can grow year round, or even grow for more than 4 months out of the year, 3 months out of the year really. That it just was not really doable for us, especially because we have a family that we're still feeding. If it was just Dan and I, we could probably do it, but not with still having lots of young mouths to feed. So we made the decision that, at least for now, we are going to continue raising meat as humanely as we can for now. And it is something that we kind of revisit sometimes and talk about. But for now, at this point, we do feel good about our decision to continue to raise meat. We are making some really good progress here. I just got 5 of these birds parted out. We have a big giant bowl of chicken breasts here, another equal sized bowl of legs and thighs. And then I have a whole bunch of backs here as well that I'll probably do another 5 chickens right now, and then I'll jar up these chicken breasts, vacuum seal the bags, and get our stock going outside. So let's grab 5 more. So I usually like to roast my backs. I think I mentioned that yesterday, but I definitely do not want to be running the oven in the heat. So I'm going to throw my raw backs into my big pot outside. Oh, it looks like it is starting to cloud over. We are supposed to get lightning storms today, which is not great. but it's supposed to come with rain as well, and it does look like potentially we could end up with some rain even this morning, which would be absolutely fantastic. So this is my Presto electric canner. So I have 3 liters or 3 quarts of water in here, and this fits 5 jars. So we're going on the pressure canning option, and we are going to set this is going to be for 90 minutes, and then it just honestly just goes step by step exactly what you're supposed to do. So now it says insert jars, which I have now done. Now it is warming the jars. So it's gonna beep once these jars have warmed up. Okay, so we have a bunch of packaged chicken that's gonna be heading out to the freezer. Chicken backs in our pot, and filling up this pressure canner. So I am gonna head back out to the garden again shortly and pick a whole bunch of herbs and delicious things to throw into this pot as well. Look at how beautiful these plants look. Gorgeous, and we are gonna have so much food to harvest out of this garden in the next couple weeks. On top of the celery, the onions, the garlic that we added into our other broth, I'm also gonna grab some herbs here. I'm gonna grab some sage, some rosemary, little oregano, some thyme, bunch of parsley, some little garlic over here again. So now I'll head down, and actually have to open up the high tunnel while we're down here, but we'll also grab some basil. Hey, we've got some savory here too I'll throw in. This Thai basil smells just absolutely incredible. There, I think we have enough herbs to make that stock taste really good. I think what I might end up doing is finishing up this chicken inside because it's going so smoothly and quickly, and then later on this afternoon come out and spend some time in the garden and do a really big harvest in the garden, because there is a lot to harvest. Check this out over here. Our raspberries are starting to ripen. We can actually start picking raspberries. Our little Juliet cherry tree is absolutely loaded with ready to pick cherries. Tons and tons in the main garden over here to harvest as well. So I'll make sure that I film that for you, and I'll share that with you in a few days. Okay, so now it says to fill the jars, and our jars are nice and hot, so we are going to need tongs to pull them out. Okay, so our jars are now filled. Turn it to lock right here. Put our lid on and lock it in, and then press our next button. So now it is heating up. And out here I have this canner filled and starting to heat up. We have all of our herbs and our chicken and everything starting to simmer in here, and it's starting to smell really good. We have our broth that we made in the Instant Pot last night, so I'm just going to strain this. And we're going to jar up this broth. The color on this broth is so pretty. You can skim the fat off your broth if you want to. You can put it in the fridge overnight, but I'm not going to worry about that this time. Okay, so I have this canner that is a mix of the chicken and the broth. So whenever you are going to mix different products in one canner load, you always want to set your timer and your weight for the product that has the longest processing time, and that will make sure that everything is processed to the time that it needs to be. So this is 90 minutes for meat, so I'm going to be setting it 90 minutes for meat, even though the broth has less processing time, and that's going to be to 15 pounds of pressure. This pressure canner out here is now off gassing, so I've set the timer for 10 minutes, and then I'll put the weight on. So the reason that you need this to get to off gas all that extra air that's in there is because if there's lots of air in your canner, it can actually affect the temperature that the canner can get to. That's why this process is important. So we do have all of this chicken broth that we need to process as well. So I'll hold off ending this video until we have all of this in jars, and I'll show you how much we ended up with when we're all finished. All right, friends, we are finished. We ended up with 36 quarts of chicken between the chicken and the broth itself, and I'm so happy about it. And I just wanted to give you kind of my final opinions about this pressure canner, the Presto electric pressure canner. So my family is pretty much entirely sold on this pressure canner because it's quiet. It does not make any sound. And if you have ever pressure canned with a regular pressure canner before, you know it is very noisy. It's constantly making noise in the background, and having this quiet, still doing the same thing, is absolutely fantastic. The second thing that we all love about it is that it does not heat up the house. So there's a little bit of heat that comes off of it, but nothing like having a large pressure canner on the stove. So this is an investment. I think it was $550 Canadian. So not an inexpensive canner in comparison to a Presto stovetop canner, but less expensive than buying an all-American canner. And I think that if you are just starting out with pressure canning, that this would be a better investment for you, especially if you're not planning on doing really large batches. If you're doing really large batches, then getting a larger all-American or Presto canner stovetop one might be a better choice for you. But what we're talking about doing now is actually just getting another one of these, because I do pressure can a ton throughout the summer, and just running 2 of these rather than having my large stovetop ones. You did see I was using a propane stove outside for my pressure canner. One thing that I will say about doing that is, number one, I wouldn't recommend doing that if you are brand new to pressure canning, because it is hard to regulate the temperature on one of those stoves, and you can risk overheating your canner fairly easily. So I just wanted to mention that, because I did show that I was doing that. My only complaint with this particular pressure canner, and maybe the other electric pressure canners are not like this, is there's not an alarm between each stage to notify you that you need to do the next step. And it would be super handy if it did have that. So for instance, it'll have the warming jar option, and then from that to the fill option, I just wish it had some type of way to notify you that that next stage is ready for you. And the same for when you put the regulator on, which is this piece right here. I wish it had a notification, just an audible way to alert you that the machine is ready for that next stage. Other than that though, I really like this. So I'll just show you close up what the chicken looks like in the jar. So this liquid here is actually just the liquid out of the chicken itself. So that's what it looks like when you can it without added liquid. And you can see here at the top that there's some space where there's not liquid, and that's totally fine. It doesn't affect the storageability of the product at all. And the broth turned out really nice. Color's nice, it tastes really good. All in all, a really productive canning day, and I hope that you enjoyed coming along with me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.